My name is Olga, and this is a recording of a talk I gave last week in the Barbara Bates Center for the Study of the History of Nursing at the University of Pennsylvania School of Nursing. I would like to acknowledge my dissertation committee, chaired by Dr. Carol Polifroni, and the funding which has supported my education, training, and research while these ideas emerged and were refined, including a University of Connecticut predoctoral fellowship, a federal graduate assistance in areas of national need predoctoral fellowship, and my current support as a postdoctoral fellow on the National Institute of Nursing Research Training Grant, Advanced Training in Nursing Outcomes Research, awarded to my primary mentor, Dr. Linda Aiken. Today, I will be talking with you about the ideas in my new paper, The Integrality of Situated Caring in Nursing and the Environment, that is featured and available for free download on the Advances in Nursing Science Journal website. The ideas in this paper are written for an academic audience. However, the message is for all nurses, nursing students, nursing educators, researchers, and colleagues interested in the work and unique knowledge of nursing. The term integrality refers to the oneness, unity, or wholeness of human beings and their environment. In this paper, I expand on this concept to include the essence of nursing, which I define as situated caring, encompassing both therapeutic relationships and therapeutic actions. The knowledge of nursing takes many forms, and where I have focused is on the foundational level of nursing knowledge, the basic concepts and worldviews that underpin both health nursing and sick nursing that Nightingale referred to 120 years ago when she wrote about nursing as the art of health, which every mother, girl, mistress, teacher, child's nurse, every woman ought practically to learn. And I would add that the essentials of nursing are also important for every father, boy, soldier, coach, every man as well. On the first day of my junior year of nursing school, my professor put up this slide. When an apple is cut, others see seeds in the apple. We as nurses see apples in the seeds. And she went on to explain the way we as nurses viewed, approached, and worked with our patients was distinct from other disciplines. The seeds represent human potential for growth and transformation, and the holographic principle that every cell contains the DNA or pattern of a person or apple tree, meaning that rather than thinking of a person in terms of their disease or ill-functioning part, we learn to see and work with the whole person in the context of their environment and experience. Along with the apples and the seeds metaphor, I would also argue that we as nurses see pitting edema in the mangoes. Most of my coursework throughout my undergraduate and graduate studies split the world in terms of right brain or left brain thinking, sometimes referring to this split as different ways of knowing or different paradigms or worldviews that were in opposition. Over the years, I studied biology, chemistry, physics, anatomy and physiology, statistics, and many courses in quantitative research methods. I internalized the scientific method, sometimes called the nursing process, and assessed the quality of evidence for practice based on whether tests of significance had rejected the null hypothesis in randomly selected samples of diabetics, sometimes referred to as patients with diabetes, or just clients. There were also courses in English, anthropology and sociology, psychology, art, political science, world religions and ethics, and qualitative research methods. I internalized methods that critically considered the social, cultural, and historical context of a lived experience or event, such as the Vietnam War. I also discovered that my own attitudes and beliefs as a nurse and a researcher impacted the stories, symptoms, or data that my patients or study participants shared, and how they later interpreted the meaning of their symptoms and experiences. The right brain, left brain thinking split was most pronounced during the first semester of my PhD program, where in addition to courses in qualitative and quantitative research methods, we studied the philosophies of science that had developed over time and were asked to select one to ground our work. The problem was, no one philosophy or paradigm seemed adequate to explain all of nursing knowledge. I started to question the need to choose a single philosophy and also to identify my nursing practice and research with only one of the major nursing paradigms. "You must do the thing you cannot do," said Eleanor Roosevelt. After reading the classic book Flatland, where a two-dimensional triangle is frightened and then enlightened as he discovers the third dimension, the impossible task of reconciling opposing paradigms seemed possible, at least to me. The breakthrough was discovering the contemporary philosophical writing of Ken Wilber, whose approach to understanding knowledge begins with the assumption that we encounter the world in terms of holons, or whole parts, which is another way of seeing apples in the seeds. Wilber also describes his integral vision in terms of patterns, the patterns we notice when considering different perspectives simultaneously, as well as the patterns that reflect stages of development or expertise, states of matter or consciousness, and types, including phenotypes, genotypes, and stereotypes. Integral vision considers, at a minimum and simultaneously, the individual exterior realm of the organism and language, the individual interior realm of self and consciousness, the collective interior realm of culture and worldview, and the collective exterior realm of social systems and structures. I'll illustrate with the example of an apple, which is also a written pun for peace in Chinese. So we can start our pattern of the apple from the objective perspective, the material body, including the skin, flesh, and seeds, which when properly nourished will grow and develop into apple trees that may or may not bear edible fruit. The next perspective for our pattern is subjective, our thoughts, emotions, memories, and sensations as we encounter an apple. In this case, one of my favorite varieties, an enormous Cortland. Next, we'll add intersubjective perspective, where things can get really complicated, as we don't always have shared values, or religious backgrounds, or cultural backgrounds, or language. And finally, for this example, we'll add to the pattern the interobjective perspective of systems, networks, technology, government, and natural environments. Hopefully you're beginning to see that these different perspectives are neither mutually exclusive nor incompatible. So now let's start to talk about how this relates to nursing. The main point I make in my paper is that nursing is situated caring, shaped by the internal and external environment of both the patient and the nurse. I want to begin by talking about what I mean by nursing is situated caring, because the word caring turns some nurses off. So if that's you, if the word caring turns you off, please take some notes and share your thoughts and counter-arguments on the discussion blogs that are mentioned at the beginning and end of this presentation. I'm going to revisit an essay Florence Nightingale wrote about nursing, focusing on her description of the nurse proper or trained nurse, who must be able to recognize the laws of sickness, the causes of sickness, the symptoms of the disease, or the symptoms it may be, not of the disease, but of the nursing, bad or good. What do we include as symptoms that are not of disease, but of nursing? In addition to hospital-acquired infections and complications, Haldor Stadier describes 5 basic modes of being with another that I refer to a few times in my paper and which deserve special mention, beginning with how we hope our healthcare providers will be with us, the biogenic mode, where one affirms the personhood of the other by connecting with their true center in a life-giving way. It relieves the vulnerability of the other and makes the other stronger, enhances growth, restores, reforms, and potentiates learning and healing. The next mode of being is termed bioactive, and this is where one acknowledges the personhood of the other, supports, encourages, and reassures the other. It gives the other security and comfort. It positively affects life in the other. This is followed by the biopassive mode of being, where one does not affect life in the other, and the biostatic mode, where one is insensitive or indifferent to the other and detached from their true center. It causes discouragement and develops uneasiness in the other. It negatively affects life in the other. Finally, and try and imagine this, is a biostatic way of being with another, where one depersonalizes the other, destroys their joy of life, and increases their vulnerability. It causes distress and despair and hurts and deforms the other. But situated caring is more than our way of being with a patient or coworker. It requires courage and communication, sometimes through an interpreter, and sometimes through a smile, silent eye contact, or a reassuring touch. And sometimes it means calling for an interdisciplinary hospice consult, or for an ethics committee meeting when patient, provider, and family's values conflict. The type of nursing education, level of experience, and number of patients a nurse is caring for at a given time can substantially impact the level of care he or she is able to provide. Additionally, information technology systems used to access medications, chart and communicate about a patient's condition, and request or order treatments and tests, special diets, supplies, and services can facilitate or hinder the care that nurses are able to provide. The word situated means to put in context and describes the circumstances surrounding something, in this case nursing. Situated caring in nursing means that what caring is depends on where you are in terms of time, space, and culture, as well as one's level of development in terms of training, experience, and moral ethical development, and the type of care situation, which could range from a disaster or emergency to a routine or relaxed encounter. When viewed through the lens of the right-hand quadrants, nursing is technical actions and physical behavior. When viewed through the lens of the left-hand quadrants, nursing is the caring thought, feeling, and intention behind the actions. These are not two different types of nursing, for without caring, our work would merely be tasks that could be performed by machines. On the flip side, without action, our most caring intentions are little more than silent prayer. Now I'd like to focus on the concept of the environment, specifically what I mean by the internal and external environment. Nightingale is often quoted as saying the role of the nurse is to put the patient in the best environment for the natural reparative process to occur. Attention to sanitation and noise pollution remains a priority in today's hospitals and healthcare institutions. However, the environment of our patients and their families extends outside the controlled environments we have created and encompasses economic conditions that might be local or global in nature. Access to clean water and nutritious food are not only a problem in countries like Haiti, but also in developed countries, where the appearance of malnutrition or contaminated water may take a different form. The American Nurses Association Code of Ethics for Nurses states that the nurse has a responsibility to be aware not only of specific health needs of individual patients, but also of broader health concerns such as world hunger, environmental pollution, lack of access to health care, violation of human rights, and inequitable distribution of nursing and healthcare resources. In my paper, I sometimes refer to the environment as the cosmos, meaning the entire universe in all its many dimensions: physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual. From an integral or unitary worldview, aspects of the inner environment cannot be separated from the external environment, and thoughts, beliefs, and cultural norms impact how we perceive our external environment. For example, individual or collective paranoia can impact how a government response to a communicable disease outbreak is perceived. Consider also how the seasons, lighting, and weather can impact an individual's physical or mental health, and how an economic depression impacts the health of families, communities, and entire countries. Even the death of a prominent international figure like Steve Jobs, the co-founder of Apple, impacts the cosmos. Here the doctor says, the bad news is you've got advanced stage humans. The good news is they've just about run their course and you should be on the mend soon. So now I'm going to switch the focus to those advanced stage humans and how we define humans, and if besides our patients, we also count nurses as humans. Even those nurses that skip meal breaks and bathroom breaks to care for 12 patients at a time for a 12-hour shift that's gone into overtime. Nursing is situated caring, shaped by the internal and external environment of both the patient and the nurse. How do we define human beings? The Chinese character for human is zhen, and has evolved over time to be written in 2 strokes, representing the torso and legs of a person. Is being human about our anatomy and physiology? Do we define human beings by their ability to survive outside the womb, or at the moment of conception, or when they're capable of feeling pain, or when they can express emotion or have a certain level of brain activity? Is it possible to be less than fully human and still be alive? This is a picture of a man who was cut in half by a truck and who not only survives but thrives. He had hope and courage and an inner strength that inspires me every time I look at these images. His caregivers and family members did not forget who he was before the accident and celebrated the milestones at each stage of his recovery and in his life. Legs do not make the gene. Gene has a second meaning, written as a combined form of the characters for human and the number 2, giving the meaning of humaneness and alluding to our interdependency with each other. While gene can be thought of as the ideal nurturing attitude of a parent towards their child, in time it is eventually the child who will nurture and sometimes carry their parent. Our ability to care for each other is dependent on the resources that we have available, including our access to healthcare, technological advances, and living in a culture and society that values spending time and money to ensure that differently abled people can participate meaningfully and actively in society and enjoy the best possible quality of life, whether they're male or female, young or old, rich or poor, from a city or from the country. When speaking of a human being, the unitary or whole person is the whole on or whole part of a whole family, a whole community, culture, or population. The attitudes and beliefs or prejudices of a human being or culture are part of the inner environment, and when interacting with other human beings, form part of another's external environment, which in turn impacts their internal environment. An integral conceptualization of the concept human beings provides a framework for asking and answering questions at the cutting edge of nursing and medical sciences, including recent research into genomics, exploring how social isolation or lifestyle factors can change the expression of our genetic code to create or reverse illness. The United States National Institute of Nursing Research Strategic Plan now states that the science of health encompasses the investigation of multiple health determinants, including psychological, physiological, genomic, environmental, familial, societal, and cultural factors, and their impact on the health promotion and self-management behavior of individuals within their communities. This is an explicit reference to the idea that human beings are inseparable from the environment and an invitation for nursing innovation in health research and the transformation of patient care. There's a popular theory that because many of our ancestors survived times of famine and blight, we're genetically prone to store fat during times of plenty, predisposing us to become overweight. Another theory involves inexpensive refined sugars, flours, and fats in our current diets. A recent feature in Time proposes yet another possibility, that our genetics and environment are inextricably linked, a field of study termed epigenomics. Researchers at Duke created mice that were specially bred with a gene called the agouti gene that, when turned on, produced mice with yellow coats that grew plump and were prone to diabetes and cancer. When the gene was turned off, the mice were born with brown coats and grew to be slim and healthy. Researchers wanted to know if maternal mice exposure to contaminants such as bisphenol A released from plastics would affect the gene expression of their offspring. They found that it did, producing offspring with the agouti gene predominantly turned on. In addition to exposing the pregnant mice to bisphenol A, they also tried simultaneously supplementing the maternal diets with genistein, an active ingredient in soy. The result was that more of the offspring were born with the agouti gene turned off. Additional studies found that agouti mice fed diets rich in methyl donors found in onions, garlic, and beets produced brown, slim, and healthy offspring with the agouti gene primarily turned off. But the lesson doesn't end here. It's not just about what mama or abuelita ate or didn't eat. Do you remember hearing about Dr. Ornish's nutrition and lifestyle program for reversing heart disease? Have you ever talked with a patient or family member about trying his program? Consider that some of Dr. Ornish's more recent research has shown that nutrition and lifestyle can not only reverse heart disease and diabetes, but also modulate or change the expression of our genes, including those that control tumor formation, oxidative stress, and inflammation. And if you're interested in aging, or I should say interested in not aging, this is just the tip of the iceberg, with additional implications for the tips of the telomere. Speaking of youth, I have a lot of optimism for the next generation of scientists after spending some time last week as a judge at my daughter's elementary school science fair. The children were excited about their experiments and had worked hard to accurately record their measurements at different time points for different samples. One of the projects tested the spoilage rates of pasteurized milk compared with raw milk. Another studied the effect of planting vegetation on soil erosion, and a third explored the effects of music, played in major and minor keys, on mood in people from different cultures. While many of the judges and parents of the children had PhDs, I didn't get the sense that any of the projects were destined for publication in a leading science journal, but one never knows. Therapeutic touch is a non-contact energy therapy used by nurses in some areas that is based on the idea that a human energy field exists, that this energy field is associated with a person's health or sense of well-being, and that this energy field can be manipulated or repatterned in a beneficial way by a trained and well-intentioned practitioner. The science fair project that made its way into the Journal of the American Medical Association used the outcome of whether or not therapeutic touch practitioners could detect if the experimenter's hand was being held over either their right or left hand. Based on this child study, the editor of JAMA recommended that patients and insurance companies alike refuse to pay for therapeutic touch, or at least question whether or not payment is appropriate until or unless additional honest experimentation demonstrates an actual effect. And the winning experiment is from the field of molecular and cell biology. Dr. Granowich's research team at the University of Connecticut Health Center is working to understand the effect of therapeutic touch on the growth and differentiation of cells. Her laboratory has studied normal cells isolated from patients' tendon, bone, and skin, as well as cells derived from bone cancers. Her work was funded by the National Institute of Health's National Center of Complementary and Alternative Medicine. But could these findings possibly be true? And the judge in the physics court says, "Having gone up and refused to come down, I hereby find you in violation of the law." Here is another study that, while less impressive, may be more believable. The investigators explored a different non-contact energy therapy called Reiki, also done by trained practitioners, including some who were nurses. Patients who were receiving outpatient chemotherapy were randomly assigned to standard nursing care, fake Reiki, or actual Reiki, and these were all done by registered nurses. The study found that both groups of patients who had one-on-one support of a registered nurse during chemotherapy benefited in terms of enhanced comfort and well-being. Interesting, but what exactly were the nurses doing who weren't doing Reiki? Would you say they were just being nurses, or that they were doing nothing? In case you can't read the date, this is the December 12th, 2011 issue of The New Yorker that featured a study about the power of nothing. The byline reads, "Could studying the placebo effect change the way we think about medicine?" And I would add to that, can it change the way we think about nursing? The article featured the work of Ted Kapczyk, a a doctor of Oriental medicine who I had the pleasure of meeting while visiting the Osher Center for Integrative Medicine at Harvard a couple years ago. He is now the director of a Harvard-wide program in placebo studies and the therapeutic encounter. Some of his work has focused on improving outcomes for patients with irritable bowel syndrome through doing nothing, or at least nothing in terms of the medications and medical treatments that can be patented or restricted to any one profession's scope of practice. In this study, published in the British Medical Journal, Kapchik's team randomized patients into 3 groups: a waiting list, a group that received fake acupuncture with limited provider interaction, and a group that received fake acupuncture augmented with an extended, engaged, and therapeutic relationship with the provider. Similar to the earlier study about nurses and Reiki, in this study, all of the treatments were done by professional licensed acupuncturists. The providers in the augmented group provided no education or counseling, but rather engaged in conversation about the patient's experience of their symptoms in a warm, friendly manner that involved active listening, empathy, 20 seconds of thoughtful silence while feeling the pulse or pondering the treatment plan, and communication of confidence and positive expectation. Again, no actual acupuncture was involved in this phase of the study. Just imagine if that therapeutic relationship could be made into a pill. And that's sort of what Kapchik's team tried to do next, using a randomized controlled trial of an open placebo, meaning they gave half of the study participants a bottle of sugar pills labeled placebo, while the rest received nothing, or almost nothing. What was explained to both groups was that the placebo effect is powerful, and the body can automatically respond to taking placebo pills like Pavlov's dogs who salivated when they heard the bell. They were instructed that a positive attitude helps to produce a placebo effect, but it's not necessary, and that taking the placebo pills faithfully is critical. Nightingale might say these instructions were part of giving the patients the internal environment necessary to support the natural reparative process. Halsdorf-Staudier would remind us that these are examples of biogenic and bioactive modes of being with another, where one affirms or acknowledges the personhood of the other and potentiates their learning and healing through support, encouragement, and reassurance. How we as nurses, healthcare providers, and a society understand the integrality or interconnected relationship of human beings and their environment shapes our understanding of and ability to improve human health. Through an integral lens, the meta-paradigm of nursing is caring that is situated in space, place, and time, and influenced by the interior and exterior environments of the nurse and patient. Nursing care, or lack of care, impacts the health of individuals, families, groups, and populations. It is essential that as a profession, healthcare system, and society, we ensure that nurses are provided with the resources and environmental supports they need to provide optimal care for their patients. Depending on the context or healthcare situation, this may take the form of lowered staffing ratios, access to continuing education, adjustments to information technology systems, and supportive work environments that encourage nurses to spend one-on-one time with their patients and advocate on their behalf. Thank you for your interest and attention, and please, if you haven't already, download a copy of my paper while it's featured and available free, open access on the Advances in Nursing Science Journal website. I also sincerely invite you to ask questions, make critical comments, and share your views on this work through 2 blog posts that have been started for conversation through the Advances in Nursing Science Journal and the Nurse Manifest Project. Thank you again.